Hello YouTube, and welcome to this new exercises tier list. Today we are going to be talking about the back. Previously I made episodes about the biceps and the triceps you can find in the description. And afterwards I asked you in a poll which muscle groups you wanted to see discussed, and you guys overwhelmingly wanted to see me discuss the latissimus dorsi. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Now, as you understand, it would be a bit silly to talk about the back as if it were one muscle group. And therefore, I decided to divide this tier list episode in 3 segments. The first one, the one that you're watching right now, is about the lats and about the middle of the back. Afterwards, we're going to also be discussing the traps and upper back in another episode. And the last installment is going to be about the lower back and every movement that develops the posterior chain. The reason why I think it's important to divide these muscle groups, even though they're all technically back muscles, is because an exercise could be really good for the lats and not that good for the traps. And you're going to see that a lot of examples of that very archetype are going to be present in today's video. So now that you understand today's focus, we can move on to the tiers. As you understand, a tier list video includes the idea I'm going to be judging and placing each lift in its own category. And today it's going to range from Peewee-tier all the way at the bottom to Yujiro-tier all the way at the top. Peewee-tier is the worst tier, it is D tier, because these are exercises that in my opinion, if you do, hoping to get a big back, you're going to keep looking like a child for years and years into your training journey. I think that the upper back truly is the sign of a mature lifter, and the muscle group that develops the slowest, yes, but also that has the most potential for growth. However, if you don't attack it properly, it's never actually going to look the way it's supposed to look, like a hulking mass of meat. Then there is going to be the mediocre tier. These are not bad exercises per se, but there are much better options out there, and therefore I don't see why anyone would do them. The next tier up is going to be the B tier, that I call the decent tier, for movements that I don't necessarily like or dislike. They're just okay, you can always find better. After this, we have the excellent tier, the A tier. These are movements that I would program myself, that I do in my training, and I recommend you guys do because they are just good, but not quite good enough to make it into the ultimate tier that I called Yujiro-tier. Now, I know for a fact that 50% of you guys know what I'm talking about and are getting excited, and the rest are a bit confused. Who the fuck is Yujiro? Well, Yujiro Hanma is a character from the manga grappler Baki that I recommend you watch. It is a free test boost for any person interested in muscles, lifting, fighting, anything masculine and high energy. All of it is in that story. And the most anabolic character of the story itself is Yujiro Hanma. And his back in particular is legendary because it is so huge that it is called the demon back. This is why I named that tier the Yujiro tier. These are your all-stars. They are movements that if you're not doing, you're just sabotaging your results because they are the cream of the crops and they give such good results that there is no excuse not to include them in your training. And now that you know everything about the tiers and that you understand what we're going to be talking about today, aka the lats and the middle of the back, we can start to move on to the tier list proper. Starting with a lift that I'm certain is going to be quite controversial with some of you guys, the deadlift. The deadlift, in my opinion, places directly in mediocre tier. Yes, I know what you're going to tell me, the deadlift, mediocre, but it's the best back builder. It's the best back builder overall, for overall mass, not for lats, not for mid back. If you only do deadlifts thinking you're going to get that Dorito back, you're going to be hugely disappointed. And I've heard myself when I got started that the deadlift was all you needed for lats because apparently the lats secure the bar close to the body. That's not enough, guys. That's just one function of the lat, and it's an isometric contraction. It is not responsible for lat or mid-back growth, at least not enough. This is why it's mediocre. And its brother, the Jefferson deadlift, also is. Just because you have a staggered stance, just because one lat gets worked more than the other, does not mean that it gets worked enough to justify it being called a good lat exercise. Pulls from the floor will make your back meatier and thicker, but it's not going to give you that V-taper shape.
And if you fall for the deadlift meme, you are going to end up with a back that is going to be very unbalanced. You're going to have what I call a fridge back that is just, again, fake, but with not much 3D effect, and it's not the most aesthetic at all. Instead, what you should be looking for are exercises that are going to target the lats in priority. And the next one is the king for it. You already know what I'm going to be talking about right now. It's going to be the pull-up. The pull-up is a no-brainer. It has to end up in Yujiro-tier. I do not want to hear anything about biomechanically it's not inclined with the fibers of the lats. I do not give a fuck. Best backs I've ever seen in my life were on people who trained pull-ups. There is a reason why calisthenic bros have amazing backs. They do pull-ups all the time. My pet theory is that these guys actually live off of bars. That's their natural habitat, and this is why their backs are jacked. If you have a shitty back and people tell you to do something else than pull-ups because apparently pull-ups don't work, tell them to go fuck themselves and go do your pull-ups. It has made one of the biggest difference in my back aesthetics. Everyone should be doing pull-ups. And here I'm talking about all sorts. So in that category in particular, we're talking about pull-ups with pronated grip, supinated grip, so chin-ups, neutral grip, wide grip pull-ups, you name it. If you're hanging from a bar and you're pulling yourself up, you're going to develop your lats. There's no way around it. After that, each variation has its own flavor. I find personally that the chin-up is going to have a tendency to develop this portion of the lat more. It's also going to work the entirety of the core because you're going to stretch yourself in this position. The pronated grip pull-up, the one that we call the pull-up proper, is going to give you more upper back and more mid-back as well, but it still works the lats and the lower lats tremendously. The neutral grip pull-up allows for spectacular stretch because it also allows you to tuck your elbows in at the top of the position and then to extend all the way. So it's great as well. And the wide grip pull-up, in my opinion, is the best lower lat builder, at least in terms of pull-up motions, and you should do them all. And the beauty of it too is that since the real limiting factor on pull-ups is going to be overuse injuries for the tendons, many people get bicep tendon pain, elbow tendon pain from pull-ups, you can rotate the movements and you'll find that the pain is going to go away. So this is an absolute must-do, Yujiro-tier for a reason. There is no arguing against that. Then we are going to be talking about the wide grip lat pull-down, which to me is only decent. Why is it only decent? It's replicating the motion of a pull-up. Well, yeah, it's replicating it, but it's not a pull-up replacement. Why? Because you're not getting the stretch. That's the beauty of the pull-up. Your entire body is hanging off a bar. I weigh 210 pounds. That's 210 pounds that my back has to handle. No part of my body is touching the floor. On a lat pull-down machine, your ass is on a seat. So even if you are pulling your exact body weight like you would do in a pull-up, it's not going to be the same. Gravity is not going to work the same. Yes, you're getting upper back stretch, but not as much as with a pull-up. Doesn't make it a bad exercise at all. It just means that, in my opinion, it's a complement to the pull-up or something you can do as a rotation, or if you don't have the ability yet to do pull-ups. Also, this pronated grip with the wide grip, because here we're talking about the wide grip, to me is also not the best variation because most machines I have found tend to be in front of you, meaning that when you're really pulling inside like this as opposed to down directly. With a pull-up bar, you don't have a choice. Gravity makes it so that your body mass is going to shift underneath the bar. So you have to pull yourself up and you have to arc your back so as to be able to engage the lats. With the lat pull down, it's very easy to pull improperly or to have the machine force you to pull improperly. And then there's also the issue of the grip, which is why I think that a supinated lat pull down, still with a wide grip, ranks itself higher. They tend to be more excellent for the development of the upper back. Why? Because it's much easier to pull low on the sternum while arcing your back. If you're like this, I found that if you try to move backwards, you're going to have a tendency to flare the elbows out too much. It's going to be tougher to tuck the elbows in.
Like this, it's easier to tuck in. This is a natural quirk of the movement. It does mean that the lat pull down with a pronated grip is going to give you more upper back development. But for proper lat development, I think that the supinated grip, the supinated lat pull down is superior. And then there is the big brother, right? We had the decent tier, the excellent tier. This next lat pull down variation is Yujiro-tier for sure. And that is the close grip, neutral grip lat pull down. To me, I'm going to say lat pull down a ton in this video, so get used to it. Right now, I think that this is absolutely unmatched. Why? Because it has everything, right? Your elbows are close together, so it's easier to tuck in. It's easier to expand all the way up and let your shoulders really rotate upwards and stretch upwards with the lats, because the close grip is very comfortable on the shoulders. It's just, to me, it's perfect. It's the type of lat pull down you want to be doing. And if you can mix that and you can rotate that with your pull-ups, it's going to give you the best results, absolutely. On top of it, I've found that the close grip allows you to concentrate your strength and to be tighter and therefore to move more weight with better form. So I recommend you actually do that variation, if any. Then we're going to talk about ring rows. A great movement as well, don't get me wrong, but in its normal classical form with a pronated grip, it is only decent. Why is it only decent? Because it's the same issue as with the pronated lat pull down. The grip is more skewed towards the ability to develop the upper back. Yes, you can tuck in like this, but you quickly are going to run into issues, because if your hand was rotated and supinated in this position, you will find that it would engage the lats tremendously more. This is only a sensation thing. I'm not saying that on paper or if we look at EMG data, it is going to be the case. It's just a tendency of the movement that I found. And since there are better ways to do ring rows without actually running into such issues, I think that we should always favor and prioritize the other one. And the other one is, of course, the supinated ring row. That to me is excellent. I rank it excellent immediately. For the reasons I just explained, I think it's easier to throw the lat when you go up and you let the body go downward and let the arm extend in front of you. It's easier to throw the lat stretch. One thing I would say about that lift is that it is technical in the sense that it will develop a tendency to over-recruit the bicep. The bicep will be recruited, but keep in mind that when you do chin-ups, supinated lat pull down, or supinated ring rows, the bicep is just an accessory mover. It's not the main mover. And if it becomes the main mover, you are doing the movement wrong. It is the same with the rings. Please make sure you actually use your back and you pull with your back. But if you actually manage, you will find that it gives tremendous benefits. I cannot rank it higher because it's with body weight. And I've found also that you have a tendency to run out of juice quickly on that movement for reasons that are exterior to the fatigue of the back. Example, your grip could give up. If you're someone who's a little bit heavier, your grip could fatigue faster, which is why something like, again, a neutral grip lat pull down will be superior. Your grip is a non-factor because your hands are hooked within the implement and you're pulling downwards, as opposed here to you having to actually hold onto the ring. Still, I think that everyone should be doing their ring rows because it is a great way to throw the back if you're someone who can somehow never throw the back on back exercises. Now that ring rows are out of the way, let's start talking about weights. Calisthenics are king for upper back development, but it does not mean that you must stick to them. If you are a calisthenic bro, you can get beyond and get even more results if you implement free weights into your training. And the next movement is one I recommend everyone do as well, the Dumbbell Row, that lends itself Yujiro-tier. This is godlike, this is S tier. And I think that people underestimate the greatness of the Dumbbell Row because it's a movement that's so old that it's sort of like old news as well. So people just overlook it for fresher, newer, more exciting movements. Guys, don't sleep on the dumbbell row. You can build a monster back with dumbbell rows. The guy in the illustration that I'm showing you right now is doing it with a knee on the bench. It's not bad per se, but I think that there are better ways to do so. For example, a tripod dumbbell row. What does it mean? It means that you're going to espouse a staggered stance and you're going to do your dumbbell rows inside that staggered stance. I made videos about that on my channel. You can go check them out. I think that it is going to be more conducive to long-term health for most people, and it also helps because it's easier to rotate the hips without straining the lower abdomen and risking an hernia. Yes, you heard me right, twisting the abdomen. You are not supposed to dumbbell rows going down and going up like this. I see so many people do that. It's a waste. You're training the back. Let the back stretch when you go down, right? Just look at what you see right there. What is happening here? The lat is doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to catch the weight, and it's perfectly fine if you rotate inside at the bottom of the movement. This is what is going to make you feel that lat and stretch that lat. The bottom of the movement is key. The squeeze at the top is a nice little bonus, or nice little extra, but it's not where most of the meat is going to be built. So absolutely do your dumbbell rows and do them properly. Then we have a variation of the dumbbell row that I think is slightly inferior, and that is the croc row. The croc row is a dumbbell row that you do in front of you with a neutral grip in this position. So it's not like this. I see some people who do dumbbell rows like this and they call it croc row. No, the croc row is a very specific movement that was popularized by a powerlifter. And in this scenario here, the reason why I think it is inferior is because it's more of a grip back exercise, meaning that you're going to have a tendency to want to lift more weights and focus more on the explosive positive and then not necessarily control the negative. Does it mean that you're forced to do them like this? No. I do my croc rows as variations and rotations for my dumbbell rows, and I do them with a slow movement. And the beauty of this movement is that you can do a pendulum swing at the bottom, so you can allow the arm to go inside like this, much more than if the grip is the normal grip for a dumbbell row. And you will find that this also is going to stretch the lats and the area of the mid-back in a fashion that I have never found another lift replicate. The reason why I think that they're slightly less effective for the lats is because it's going to recruit more upper back, because you're going to have a more open elbow as opposed to a tucked in elbow. It is unavoidable. Then we have a practical joke of an exercise. You see, I just spoke to you about two great rows variations that are going to make your back blow up in size. The next one is like their little brother that never could quite make it. And this is why he ends up in Peewee-tier. This is our first atrocious back exercise I recommend you never do. What is a renegade row? A renegade row is a row you do in a push-up position with a dumbbell in each hand and you rotate between each arm. Why is it a terrible lift? It's because whoever came up with it was more concerned with the lift looking cool than actually doing something that was going to create a big back, since you get none of the benefits of rows and all of the inconveniences. One, there is no stretch in that movement. Why? Well, because how are you supposed to stretch? There's the floor right there. The floor is preventing you from allowing the body to stretch. You're always like this. So you do this. You do only the squeeze, which is the least important part. Then you're doing it in the push-up position. So you're going to be limited by your balance and by your core. Who wants that? We want to lift heavy fucking weight for the upper back. You are not supposed to be limited by anything else than the back. Your grip, for example, would be a limiting factor. We want to make sure that this never happens. So this is idiotic. And yet, I see so many noobs do it, or athletes. Why? For coordination, there are so many better ways to train coordination. But for hypertrophy, this is absolute garbage. I better never actually catch any of you guys doing that, or else you will actually feel the wrath of the Frenchman, meaning that I'm most likely going to retreat. All right, that is out of the way. Let us move on to the next movement, which is the straight arm pull down. A favorite of bodybuilders for some reason. I personally have never found that lift to be exceptional. To me, it is only decent, since you will find that what you're expecting from the lift is tremendous stretch in the lats, but because you're doing it with the cable handles the weight moving up and down, so the stretch and the negative is not as effective as it could be with free weights, as we will discuss later. The real benefit of that movement is the positive, because you can squeeze, and the squeeze feels good, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't justify doing that exercise over other exercises. I think that this is a good finisher movement, so at the end of your workout when you're already tired, again, just to feel the squeeze and to create contraction and feeling and sensation in the upper back. But I don't think that it's possible to really create a massive back off of that, and this is why, to me, it is only decent. And if you're someone who loves that movement, you could tell me, okay, well, I've been told that this is the way if you want to expand your back, if you want to expand your rib cage. So what exactly am I to do? Well, what about doing the actual lift that this lift is trying to replicate? How about doing pullovers? Pullovers that, of course, are going to end up in Yujiro-tier. If you're not doing pullovers, what are you even doing with your life? This is an absolutely godlike movement. The feeling is unmatched. The feeling of stretching in the lat, of the expansion of the rib cage. Everything is working. Everything on the side that you see right there is expanding, is trying to catch the weight. The one thing I have against that movement is that, sadly, because of the way humans are built, the structure that is going to create the connection between the rib cage and the top of the dumbbell is going to be your arms and your rotator cuff. So if you get hurt on that movement, it's going to be because your shoulders are going to give. But outside of this, if you do them properly with proper form and higher rep ranges, this is insane. This is what has transformed my physique. If you go back and you look at the way my body was shaped when I was standing right there, this didn't exist. This flaring out of the lats, I didn't used to have it. I'm not flexing right now. It's just the way my body naturally looks, relaxed. Why? Expanding up the rib cage. People think expanding means that your ribcage blows up like a balloon. No, it means that it's shaping itself up. It's expanding on the side. And now you have connecting things between the top of the armpit and the low here without having to flex. This to me is a must do. You must do your pullovers with dumbbells, with easy bar curls, whatever. Find a way that is going to be best. For most people, a dumbbell pullover is going to be great. I know that some people don't feel it in their lats. If it's the case, try to find another movement. Later on in the video, I'm going to present a variation that is also ranked very high, so maybe that one would actually work for you. Then we have another technically legendary movement, the Yates row, which ends up directly ranking in excellent tier. Now, the Yates row is a little bit special in the sense that it's a supinated grip movement, while the weight is
dangling off of your arms, and therefore there are some risks associated, okay? Dorian Yates actually tore his bicep doing that movement, and many people actually hurt their bicep tendons doing that movement. Does it mean it's dangerous? No, if you know what you're doing, but you're sort of paying a price for all of the benefits you get. Since, same logic here. When you do your rows like this, it's going to be harder to tuck the elbows in. But the second you rotate like this, now you can go much deeper naturally. And this is a Yates row, by the way. Rows in general tend to confuse the heck out of people. So I see a ton of people doing Yates row when they really do barbell rows or Penley rows. A Yates row is done with a very vertical torso off of a rack, where you are going to row directly into your belly button. If you're not doing that, you're not doing a Yates row. The goal is lower lat development and mid-back development. Does it work? Yes, absolutely. Is it obligatory to do for development? No. I've heard some people say, oh, it's the only row that can develop that area of the body. Absolutely not. That's bullshit. But if you love it, absolutely do it. I skip them because I'm a prima donna, and anything that endangers my precious bicep tendons, I'm going to skip. But maybe you're not like me, maybe you are less fragile than I am, and you can handle them, in which case, absolutely do your Yates row, they are great. Then we have the classic lift, the one that anyone who has started in the gym has done to develop their upper back, the barbell row. And I might shock some of you today. I know that some of you have already been red-pilled on barbell rows, but they're not that good for upper back development and lat development, which means they rank directly in decent tier. I'm not going to put them below because it would be a little bit too harsh to say that this is a mediocre lift. It's not. It's still going to grow your upper back, but you understand that because of the position, you also are going to row with your legs and the posterior chain. So if this was a deadlift accessory tier list, or if it was a posterior chain upper back development tier list, it would be ranked Yujiro-tier because it gives you a lot of overall fatigue. But sadly, not enough for the lower back, not enough for the upper back, sorry, not enough for the lats. It is too diffuse. It is too chaotic. It's a chaotic lift. I don't care how good your form is. And that's even saying that your form is going to be good because, like most people, you're going to want to row more and more. You're going to quickly realize that this is not a movement that you can progressively overload easily. So you're going to try to cheat to keep the performance up, and you're going to use more and more and more legs and less upper back. Just because your elbows do this and then go back down does not mean that the upper back is maximally recruited. And this is typically the issue with rows. People say, well, I'm rowing, so I'm growing. And maybe not. This is, I think, not the movement one should select if their goal is pure upper back hypertrophy, because it's going to fatigue the entire system and spine so much that you might be out of juice afterwards to do movements that would actually target the upper back more directly in a more systemic fashion. So only decent tier. I don't want to demonize them too much. They're so great, but they're not enough for upper back development. And anyone who has done 5x5 or strong lift knows it. Your upper back was not aesthetic at the end of your first months or first year of newbie training and newbie gains, and you know it. A guy that would have spent that first year doing calisthenic workouts and movements off of a pull-up bar will mug you absolutely in terms of upper back aesthetics. And since this logic applies to the barbell row, you understand that the cheat barbell row, also known as the cone row, also known as the rubbish row, is going to be even worse. And it's so bad actually that I'm putting it in Peewee-tier. Now, this is, I think, going to trigger some of you guys. And you might tell me, well, I'm huge and I do cheat rows with 300 pounds, 400 pounds, so they work. I would retort to that you're most likely huge because of other movements, and you're using the mass you built off of these other movements to be good at these types of rows. Also, this is more of a deadlift than a row in raw. because the in portion and the strength comes from the legs. What you're doing afterwards is you're just trying to catch the bar as high as you can, and then you let it dangle off of your arms and you just repeat again and again. Is it horrible? No, because you're still getting the stretch, but considering that this stretch only lasts a moment, you don't really control the negative at all, you only get the bottom portion and then you start up again. This is much more of a deadlift accessory movement, and as I said, deadlifts don't grow lats. So why is it worse than deadlifts? Well, it's worse because too many people do them thinking, oh, I'm going to blow up my upper back, and they don't. So I have to talk points just for the sake of discouraging some of you guys. On top of it, one could argue that the stimulus to fatigue ratio for the upper back is even worse for something like a cheat row than it is for a deadlift. The chances of injury are also higher because you are throwing the weight around. So overall, I would say avoid that movement. I used to do that movement. I'm not speaking out of my ass. I think that if your goal is a bigger upper back and bigger lats, there are such better options out there. For example, a cell row. A cell row that takes the legs out of the equation and now you actually row with your upper back, which makes this movement an A-tier exercise. I think that anyone can benefit from doing the cell rows. The reason why it's not at the top is a surprise. It's because there is another lift,
another variation, quote unquote, of the cell row that is even better, if you can believe that. But as for the cell row, the reason why it's great is legs are out of the equation, you actually pull with your back alone, and therefore you know exactly how much fatigue and stimulus the upper back gets. The guy in the illustration here is pulling very high up with his elbows flared out and rotated inwards. If you want lat development, you won't do that. Instead, you will try to row inside your belly button. So if you flip it around, this means that the bar at the top of the positive starts at your belly button, then it rotates outside, so it stretches the lats outside and it comes back in. So you do a pendulum swing, a pendulum motion just like this, and this is how you do a proper cell row for your lats. Now, we have another row, lots of row candidates today, of course, we're talking lats, that people do a ton, and it tends to be in a ton of programs, but that no one does properly for reasons I'm just going to explain. And this is the pendlay row. The pendlay row that is going to be our third mediocre lats exercise. Why? One, you don't know how to do your pendlay rows. I've seen so many people do barbell rows and call them pendlay rows. Guys, a pendlay row is done with your back horizontal with the floor. So it's parallel with the floor. You're not standing upright, and it's a positive only movement. There are no negatives. You should be so close to the floor that at the bottom of the negative, the bar hits the floor, so you can't go anymore. And this makes it a bad exercise for the lats. Because what grows the upper back and what grows the lats in particular? It's going to be the stretch. So if you take away the stretching component by limiting the range of motion with the floor, and on top of that you don't control the negative, well, that's just a bad exercise. I love pendlay rows, I still do them, but to me, there are better movements out there. The pendlay row is better to develop your pulling strength and your overall upper back musculature. I personally like to do them with a snatch grip, and I touch at my sternum for upper back and rear delt development, which is why the pendlay row is actually a much better trap and upper back movement than it is a lat movement. So if your one row variation in your program is the pendlay row and you think you're going to get big off of it, forget about it, skip it, and instead do something else. Next exercise is going to be the machine row. And the machine row is excellent. It's a great movement, right? Your upper back is going to be the limiting factor. You're going to be able to tuck the elbow in. If the machine is great, you're going to be able to select your grip, so supinated or neutral. All of it is excellent. It's going to give you tremendous stretch. If the machine limits your ability to stretch because of the way it's built, what you can do is you can do one arm at a time, and you're going to have your body more tilted towards the size you're doing. So you're not going to stand dead in the middle. You're going to allow the body to shift and let the resting thing here be what you're going to use to support yourself as you go around the machine to row. This is how to get the maximum benefits from that machine. But if you have one in your gym, I recommend you do that. They are just as good as dumbbell rows in my opinion. It's just that the stretch is a little bit mitigated again by the fact that the machine is going to run into you. But if you can surpass it, I would say that this is a contender for Yujiro-tier. It's just that it didn't quite make it. But in terms of movements that will absolutely make it in Yujiro-tier, this next one is, of course, going to be included. It is legendary to the point that if there was a tier above Yujiro-tier, I would put it there. And that is the sternum pull-up, also known as the Gironda pull-up. It is a pull-up that is going to have you end as parallel to the floor as possible at the top. And if you tell me that's not possible, it is. It's just that you might be too weak to do it. It's okay, I'm too weak to do it as well. I can only manage a few. Why is this so good? It's so good because it's a mix of vertical and horizontal pull. You get the best of both worlds. The problem is that many people are not able to do it. If you cannot do 10 chest to bar pull-ups, there's no chance of you doing a stun on pull-ups. I don't think it's possible. So it's reserved for an elite, which would usually make me dock points. But in this case, I mean, it is so insane. The sensation for the lats is so incredible. It even feels a little bit dangerous, meaning that it stretches the lat in a fashion that might make you think you're going to get injured. You're not going to get injured, it's just that you're getting a contraction and a stretch that you've never really felt before. So Yujiro-tier. Then we have another great machine movement, the seated two hands cable row. This one is B tier. I think that many people love that exercise for a reason, is because it might be the first exercise where you actually felt your back, because it's really hard to cheat. That being said, I still see people do that when they bend their knee, they move their torso back and forth like this. That's not the way to do it. However, the way to do it is also not this, right? This is not the way to do it either. This is just more arms, because what you're flexing is the elbow. What is going to enter the flexion movement is the elbow. Instead, you have to pull with the back. The back initiates the movement, okay? The best back training tip I can give you is that your arms are only ropes. They're just hooks. They're supposed to move the back forth and back, but that's it. That's the extent of their involvement in the movement. My issue with this in particular is that there are such better variations out there that I don't see why you would do this one and not another one. And on top of that, I find that it is greatly dependent on the type of machine you have. I've had workouts where it felt tremendous, and I've had workouts where it felt like it was doing absolutely nothing. And since there are movements that felt great and excellent for the upper back and the lat 100% of the time, I decided to put this one in decent tier. But the variation with only one arm lends itself in excellent tier. Why? For the reasons I explained with the machine row. It's tough to truly let the upper back and the lats in particular stretch when both arms are involved at once, because you might not be able to fully extend at some point. What's going to extend is your arms. So you're going to go into full extension like this, and the lats are not fully stretched. Whereas with only one arm, it's possible to wrap around like this. See this? Now you understand that with the two hands, which side are you supposed to go into? It's not really possible. So with the one at a time, you get a better stretch and also a better contraction, because this won't occur. You won't run into yourself as you do the movement. Instead, you can really tuck it in like this. So the one arm is one that I personally favor over the two arm variation. One that I think you should be doing instead. But one that you should absolutely not be doing and dodge like the plague is our next entry, the keeping pull-up. Pull-ups are godlike movements. So seeing something like this truly silences the heart. How is it possible that something that was God tier, S tier, Yujiro-tier could land itself in Peewee-tier? What happened to this great lift that it went from divinity to actual abomination of the earth? Well, I'll tell you what happened. CrossFit. People who looked at the pull-up and said, hey, you know what would be really fun is if we try to do as many as possible. Fuck form, fuck technique. We're going to swing around and flop around like fishes out of water. This is an abomination for hypertrophy. Do not do that. Why? Because you're not controlling the negative, because you are manipulating the body around to create momentum, so you are not in the position where the lats will be maximally stretched, and then you're rebounding like an asshole. Did you know that the number one exercise responsible for injuries in CrossFit classes is the keeping pull-up? And just not any injuries, rotator cuff injuries. People tear their rotator cuffs because of this, which is insane because CrossFit also includes presses, and yet the movement that gets people hurt for their shoulder is this thing. Do not do that. And if you see someone in the gym doing it, go up to them and say, hey, are you a CrossFitter? If they say yes, leave and go wash your hands. You might have caught something. But if they say no, tell them, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes out of my life to teach you how to do proper pull-ups with a slow negative and controlled movement. You might save that person's life, but you will most likely save their upper back aesthetics. And for the curious, the reason why it is very possible to injure your shoulders on that movement and why it's impossible to tear a rotator cuff doing a proper pull-up is because when you are at the bottom of the range of motion and your arms are fully extended, you're in dead hang position, this is when your tendons take the biggest brunt. They have to handle all of the weight because the upper back is disengaged. Meaning that if you are at maximal velocity at the end of the movement and you pull on the arms to go back up to use that momentum, guess what it's going to give? the shoulders or the tendons. This also explains why so many of you guys have tendonitis when you do pull-ups. You go too deep and you disengage the scapula and therefore the upper back. Yes, I'm teaching you how to do pull-ups again, even though I've done it a million times, but I am still boggled that some people don't understand the way the body works. All right, now that has been done and dealt with, let's talk about another bad exercise I want you guys to stop doing, the TBar Row. Another noob trap for some reason, just like with the two-hand cable row, but at least the two-hand cable row is going to prevent you from cheating. This one won't. I never see anyone do that movement without bending their knees or shifting their torso. What are you doing? You are doing a posture chain exercise. You are cheating. You can say that it's body English to be able to stretch the upper back more, but that same excuse also applies to the cheat rows and it doesn't make them any better. So T-bar rows are to be banned. On top of it, you also run into all of the issues that come from having the two hands on the handle like this. You run into your own belly or your own chest. You don't get the maximum squeeze. And you also don't get the ability to rotate the arm inside that is going to involve more lats. So overall, there are better things to do out there with that movement. And with that implement as well, because there is a type of row you can do with a landmine that is going to be much better for hypertrophy. And it's no surprise because the man who created it was very knowledgeable when it comes to hypertrophy. I'm talking, of course, about the Meadows Rows, invented by John Meadows, may he rest in peace. This movement is excellent. It is going to be a single arm movement, so you're going to be able to focus more on the stretch and the squeeze. You can position your body around the bar as much as you want. It's very easy to find the angle that is going to hit it right. Because it's a T-bar, you can rotate the bar like this, so it's easier to follow the natural angle of the arm and to create the circle I was speaking about that is so beneficial for the lats. Overall, great. It doesn't make it into Yujiro-tier.
Because if you compare it to a dumbbell row, for example, it's still limited in the sense that you are still going to have that staggered stance position, and the landmine row is going to make it so that you still have to support yourself with the lower back, the glutes, and the hamstrings more than with a standard dumbbell row. And speaking about great legends, the next one is a little bit surprising because it's not really a movement, it's a machine. Anyone who is into old school bodybuilding knows exactly what this is, because this is the holy grail of upper back development machines, especially lat development. This, my friends, is the Nautilus Lat Pulldown machine. Not this one, actually. This one is some Chinese bullshit that they're trying to replicate. Why? Because if you look up Nautilus Lat Pulldown machine on Google, you will find pages of people trying to buy them and pages of people selling a Nautilus Lat Pulldown machine that are actually all liars. They're not selling the actual machine because the actual machine, from what I know, is not being produced anymore, and the few still available on the market are incredibly expensive. So why is that machine so sought after? Well, it is because the movement is absolutely godlike for the lats. Essentially, you are facing forward and the machine is behind you. You are grabbing a handle that is going to be behind you in this position and you're going to pull in. And as you go up into the positive, the handle and the weight which are behind you, remember, force you to be pulled back like this, which stretches the lats. Many people absolutely swear that this exercise is the best thing for lat development that has ever been invented. I have tried it on a machine, a replica machine, that still did the job. Meaning that just because you don't have access to the Nautilus machine from the old school bodybuilder time, does not mean that the movement suddenly sucks. It's just that it's not going to be the same. But if your gym has one of them, absolutely try. It is a great movement. It's essentially a pullover, but instead of doing it in a movement where the weight is going to be behind you, instead the weight is in front of you, so the stretch feels a bit different. Be careful with the stretch, however. It is very easy to tear a bicep with that movement because you do it with a supinated grip, and therefore, when you are at the top, the bicep can overextend, and if it takes the brunt of the stress, it is going to tear off the bone, and you don't want that. Then to counterbalance this greatness, we have another Peewee-tier exercise, the standing pull down. Again, I don't quite understand this. It's like the renegade row. You have a perfectly good exercise for the upper back, the dumbbell row, and you decide to do them in a push-up position. Why? Well, maybe because you wanted to create something new. Same with the standing pull-down. You can do pull-downs with your ass on the bench, pulling down, a pull down, so you use the vertical pulling motion to stretch the lat. Why the fuck would you then standing up and pull like this? So now you're doing an horizontal row, but it's a shitty version because you're not going to be balanced. I see so many people do that movement with their leg on the machine. First off, poor gym etiquette. 2, fuck you. Why are you doing this? Well, I think people do this because you can move a shit ton of weight, because it's much easier to use momentum on this by shifting your body back and forth. It's like people who do face pulls with way too much weight and their torso does this. You're not doing face pulls, you're doing dick face pulls. And it's the same here. Do not do your pull down standing up. This is Peewee-tier. You're not going to get good back development off of it. Now, the next one is a little bit special. I ranked it low in mediocre tier because it is highly uncomfortable. These are chest-supported rows. And technically, if you look at the specs, they resemble still rows, meaning that they should be much higher because you can stretch the upper back, you can let the shoulders round forward to engage more lats, and it's also very easy to do things like drop set or things that are going to end up really taxing the upper back and not the lower back or legs at all. So why is it bad? 2 reasons. 1, they're all built the same way, meaning that it is rare to find that type of machine where you can adjust the handles or adjust the length of the bar or the height of the bench. And if you can't adjust it, guess what? You can go fuck yourself. Because if you want, for example, to roll towards your belly button, but the specs of the machine are not right, you can't do it. If the padding is poor, or again, if you cannot control the height, there might be a chance that it is going to run into your sternum and compress your chest, and that is horribly uncomfortable. So if you're moving a ton of weight and trying to really let the weight stretch you forward, it's just going to end up being even more uncomfortable, and it's hard to do an exercise where you feel like you're dying because it feels like your lungs are going to be pierced by your rib cage or your heart is being contracted for some reason.
And since there are so many other ways to use a bench to do movements for the upper back that are not going to be that uncomfortable, I think that this lends itself in mediocre tier. Then we have the rower. So this one is a noob trap as well, but more than a noob trap, it is a normie trap. A normie that walks into the gym for the first time is going to see this thing and say, oh sweet, I can work the entire body at once. How swell, I am going to get gigantic like my favorite bodybuilder, Ronnie Coleman. Well, sadly, you won't. If you picked up the rower and you pressed it over your head, you might have a chance. But if you just do this thinking you're going to get a big upper back, no, it's an entire body workout. It's more about cardio. And again, just because you do this does not mean that your upper back is going to grow from it if the legs initiate the movement and make up all of the momentum that you're going to use to get your elbows tucked in. Afterwards, when you move back forward with the weight, your upper back is not really stretching because the entire body is moving with the seat. So overall, horrendous exercise for the upper back. But I know for a fact that none of you actually do that, or at least I hope. One day I'm going to review a normie program, and the first exercise of the day is going to be rower, and it, in parentheses, is going to be written for the upper back. And that day is the day where I'm going to be committing crimes against humanity. Then we have the cable pullovers. So I told you guys that if you cannot handle pullovers with a dumbbell for your shoulders or because you don't feel them, you can do them with a cable. The reason why I rarely tell people to do that as the first option is because setting this up is a bitch. You have to find an incline bench, or rather a decline bench in this scenario, that you're going to walk all the way to the cable station. Then you have to find a way to set up the cables. You're in the middle of the gym, you're in people's paths. It's a nightmare. But the stretch is tremendous, the exercise is tremendous. It's just that it's super annoying to set up. So if you can do them with dumbbells, do them with dumbbells instead. And now we get to the movement that I told you was even better than a slow row, and that therefore has to be placed in Yujiro-tier, and that is the easy bar incline row. You're going to find an incline bench, you're going to set it up so as to be able to row without touching the floor, and you're going to go at it with an easy bar to allow for a closer grip, and your lats will thank you, and then you will thank me. This is a killer. This is the slow row, but without all of the bad things. The issue that I see with the slow row is that, for example, if the slow row is not high enough, you won't get the stretch at the bottom, so you're missing out. This allows you to get the stretch. What about if your slow row machine only allows for one grip? Or maybe it's a straight bar and the simulated grip feels tremendously bad. Well, the easy bar is going to allow you to have a more comfortable grip. Overall, I think that everyone who does slow rows needs to give this a try at least once. And I think that this is going to result in many people not doing slow rows anymore and just sticking to this. Next up on the list is what looks like a good idea, but is actually a horrendous idea. You know, sometimes you look at a lift and you think, okay, what is the portion of the lift that is the best for hypertrophy? And if the answer is good and you isolate that portion, maybe you can come up with variation that is going to be even better for the muscle that you're trying to target. But if you're wrong, you're going to come up with something that does absolutely nothing. And that is the dead hang. Yes, the dead hang is horrendous for upper back hypertrophy because it's the portion of the lift where the lats are disengaged. So what genius thought that just hanging there was going to grow their lats? I don't know, but I've seen people try and I can tell you that it always ends up in failure. There are people who did dead hangs with additional weight dangling off of them for months at a time and they reported zero lats growth. Why? The lats grow through the motion. It's the motion and the function of the lat that is going to make it grow, not just hanging there. Dead hangs are great for forearms, they're great for spinal decompression, but for hypertrophy, no. Do your pull-ups, do them properly, and you will grow your lats. Don't do things like this. And the next one is a little bit in the same vein because it's a calisthenic movement, but I rank it low for different reasons. Many people say that the front lever is tremendous for the lats, and I don't think it's necessarily untrue. It's just that the technical rating is so high, and the things you get in return, the benefits are so low that it doesn't justify it. The sternum pull-up is much easier to do and it gives you much more benefits for the lats, much more hypertrophic benefits. The front lever, I mean, it's like a deadlift. The lats stabilize the upper body. They keep your arms close to the upper body, but they're not working that much. And I know that when you look at someone doing front levers, it looks impressive and their lats look cool, but they look cool because they're contracted. Just because a muscle looks like it's working during an exercise does not mean that it's actually working. This is an important lesson to keep in mind. So many people, many calisthenic athletes, yes, look like they have tremendous lats when they do the front lever, but they built those lats off of pull-ups and not off of the front lever. Then we have chest-supported dumbbell rows, and this naturally is going to end up in excellent tier because it's essentially a seal row that you're doing with dumbbells on an inclined bench or on an horizontal bench. So it's essentially the same thing. It's just that if your gym doesn't have a seal row machine, you can absolutely do that with dumbbells. It is just as good. And now we can get back to another calisthenic movement that I think is just a show-off and that won't actually build big lats, and that is the one-arm pull-up. That is going to be with its brother and with its comrade in crime in the mediocre tier. If you think you're going to get a gigantic back off of one-arm pull-ups, you are mistaken. It's like the front lever. It's a skill that can only be developed and applied by people who have tremendous back strength, but they did not build that back strength off of that movement. On top of that, the issue with the one-arm pull-up is that you don't control the negative. I never see anyone controlling the negative, so you don't get the stretch, and the stretch is what makes the pull-up so great for lat hypertrophy. So it's essentially a pull-up variation that is going to ask so many requirements just to produce subpar hypertrophic results. There are no reasons to do it. There's no reason to actually want to do it unless you're a calisthenic athlete or you want to look cool, but looking cool is not correlated with results. And the next exercise is proof of that because no matter how big you are, you're going to look like a little bitch doing it. And that is the diagonal iliac pull down, also known as the iliac pull down. And I know that some of you guys would want me to rank it low just to piss off all of the biomechanics gurus, but we have to be fair. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And objectively, this is an S tier exercise. It's Yujiro-tier. Would Yujiro Hanma ever do this exercise? Fuck no. And actually, funnily enough, if you want to try something interesting, try to look up that exercise and try to find one guy demonstrating it who's actually jacked with a big back. You won't be able to. Why? Most people do it wrong. Not form-wise. The form is great. The diagonal pull where you allow the lat to actually do what it's supposed to, which is wrap around the body, is great. But please, for the love of God, do it to failure. It's a safe exercise. Do it with heavy weights. The majority of people who do it with baby weights for like 15 reps, no. Hard, 8 reps, 10 reps, give it your all, squeeze. Yes, this is aligned with the fibers of the lats, but if you never actually work hard on it, you're not going to get results. So yes, it's an S tier exercise, but only if you apply progressive overload and only if you actually push yourself. The next exercise, however, no matter how much you push yourself, will do nothing for you. And if you keep doing it, thinking you're going to get jacked, you're going to keep looking like a kid. This is the TRX inverted row. Everything that is wrong with inverted rows, this does. You're way too vertical, you use way too much arm. This is typically what you're going to see some old lady do at the gym because the trainer is afraid that she's going to break her hip and then sue him. So he has her on a TRX trainer. This does nothing. For the love of God, please do something else. There are such better options out there. But the next lift might not be that option I'm talking about because it requires a lot of shoulder mobility and not everyone is built for them. And that is the behind the neck pull down or pull-ups. The two are put in the same category. and they are both to me only decent. Why? As I said, very easy to impinge a shoulder doing that, and the issue is that it's also a noob trap. People think it's cool, so they do it a ton. It is not better than a lat pull down in my opinion, because again, you're going to end up pulling in front of you instead of having the weight standing directly above your head. So the lat stretch is not going to be that great. You're going to have a tendency to shift the torso forward. I think that this is a much better upper back exercise in RODI than a lat exercise, and because this is a lat exercise tier list, it only ranks B. But don't believe people who tell you that your shoulders are going to explode if you do that. Your arms have the ability to go behind your head. Case in point, when you do squats, you are also in this position. It's just that the motion, I think, is subpar. Now, the next one is going to be a bit of a surprise. It's another calisthenic movement, one that you scarcely see people do, but that I think ranks all the way at the top. And this is the body row. So essentially, the body row is a row done on parallel bars that you can find in parks, for example,
that people usually use for dips. But if the bars are high enough, I have found that it gives a tremendous stretch. You can tuck the elbows in, and it's actually easy to load. You can have someone place plates on your belly, or you can just wear a backpack. If you wear a backpack, it might limit the range of motion. But the reason why I think this is so great is because you can move the body through space. So you can arc the body and you can allow the body to enter this pendulum motion I was talking about. I think that this is highly underrated, and it is something that can really complement other heavy movements. So doing sets of 20 to 25 at the end of a workout, or on days where you don't feel like going to the gym and you have a park next to your house, can actually be great. And since you're going to do them with a neutral grip, the stretch of the lats is going to be absolutely unavoidable. As I said, it's very possible to overstretch the upper back with a pronated grip. It's possible to overextend the arm with a supinated grip, but the neutral grip is going to force back development, and for many people, that is going to be an invaluable asset. Next, we have the muscle up, and you guys are going to think that I'm picking on calisthenic athletes. I'm not. As you can tell, I think that they have the greatest backs of any athlete, but some of their movements are too technical and too show-offy for my taste and for hypertrophic sake. I have to place the next one also in decent tier, and that is the muscle up. Why is the muscle up not higher? Because it's half of a pull-up. The pull-up is S tier, the muscle up is going to be middle tier. But it's not worse than the next one, which is essentially just a trope for the OGs out there, the towel row that ranks Peewee-tier. What is a towel row? You take a towel and you roll it. No resistance, it's going to get you jacked. Of course not. It's going to be garbage, and it's the reason why the only illustration I could find was some lady that looks like she's never lifted in her life, and she will never look like she lifts because she's doing towel row. It was a lift popularized by Mike Chang, an OG fake natty / sneakle salesman / whatever you want, who was trying to run one of the first gimmicks of YouTube fitness, and it makes me laugh to this day to think that some people might actually have fallen for that meme. Now, to get back to the serious lifts, we have the shotgun row. That is also a decent movement. It is essentially a row you're going to do with the cables, one arm at a time, doing standing up. The reason why it's not better is because why would you do that instead of doing it sitting? This is going to encourage cheating, but I guess if you want to be athletic and functional, you can do that. For hypertrophy, it's simply not what you're looking for. And then we're going to wrap up this tier list with the kettlebell swing. Why is this in the tier list, you ask? Is because I recently saw a post from a guy who said that his upper back gains came from kettlebell swing, and I was like, nah. Comes from somewhere else, maybe juice or maybe another exercise, but you did not gain bigger lats from kettlebell swings. It's a posture chain exercise. The weighted stretch at the bottom does not justify upper back gains, especially when they are tremendous. So this is not a movement you should be doing for the upper back, but I think you already knew that. And this is going to be it for this ultimate back / lats exercises tier list. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my placements. If you disagree, I'm always open to hearing about your thoughts. But in my opinion, if we take a look at the definitive tier list right there, you will see that all of the exercises in Yujiro-tier are the all-stars. These are the unavoidables. You must be doing them. Should you be doing all of them? Absolutely not. But if you find out that none of them are actually in your upper back training sessions, I think that you are just going to leave a ton of gains on the table. Please give these a try. They are absolutely god tier. Then the excellent tier exercises are very good as well. They don't have that X factor. They're not as special, but they're still great for hypertrophy and for mass. You can use them as rotations or to bring novelty into your training. And since I ranked 34 lifts today, we can pretty much stop there. I think that these are enough. All of the exercises that are in S and A tier are enough for a jacked and massive upper back. The decent tier exercise can still be done, but are not necessary, and anything below it for upper back and for lats are just laughably weak in comparison to the rest. So you can stick with the Yujiro and Excellence tier, and that should be all you actually need. As per the poll, the next tier list is going to be about the traps. But before that, I have a special tier list exercise that I'm keeping in my back pocket and that I will try to release as soon as possible. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.